Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar entitled How to Boost Your Wellbeing and Benefits Offering the Key Tactics. My name is Peter Banks. I'm the founder and MD of the HR Director. We are a strategic resource for senior HR and people leaders in print, person and online. Delighted today to partner with Howden Employee Benefits and Wellbeing, an award-winning benefits consultancy who help forward-thinking businesses maximize their investment in benefits and their people to drive better employee outcomes, engagement and business performance. Right, let's get underway. Let me just intro the topic today. So external drivers and internal pressures are pushing employers to rethink their approach to people, risk, health and well-being. And there continues to be a disconnect between business goals and talent health and well-being strategies. Getting well-being and benefits right requires a rounded approach that draws on both data from both within and external to the organization. So in this discussion-based webinar, we will explore the best tactics to boost your well-being and benefit offering in these, let's face it, challenging times. So let's introduce our panel today. Joining me today is firstly Dave Finlay. Dave is the reward manager at Fieldfisher. So good morning, Dave.
Good morning.
And also Matthew Gregson. Matthew is the executive director at Howden Group. So morning, Matthew.
Good morning.
Right, thank you for joining us, the pair of you. So let's find out a little bit more about you both, if I may. So Dave, could you just give us a little flavour about you, your role, your organisation, and perhaps number of employees, so we can find a little bit more about your position?
Thanks, Peter. Yes, I'm Dave Finlay, reward manager at Fieldfisher. We're a global law firm. We have 4 offices in the UK with about 1,200 employees and partners, and around 2,000 globally. My own background was payroll until about 8 years ago when I moved into the world of reward. My role at the firm is overseeing all of the total reward areas, including compensation, benefits and well-being.
Thanks. And Matthew, could you share a brief bio with us all, please?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Peter. You've already introduced Howden, but my role within that, I run our corporate business, so looking after all services, be that health, protection, retirement, technology, well-being, for our larger clients such as Dave and the team at Fieldfisher. And personally, I've been very lucky in my kind of 20-year career to advise some of the largest UK and indeed global employers on benefits and wellbeing strategy. So hoping to share a bit of that today.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matthew. Okay, well, let's get stuck in. So obviously we're in some challenging times at the moment, so this hopefully will give you some real insights and some help here. So let's start with our first question, and Matthew, if I can come to you first. So let's talk about if you feel there's a disconnect between HR and employees when it comes to benefits and well-being at the moment. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, indeed. So appreciating that I'm talking to an audience of HR reward professionals, but in all honesty, I do feel a lot of the time there is a disconnect between employee expectations and maybe what HR reward professionals are offering or they think that their people want. And a couple of key parts to that. One, it's very clear that employee needs and expectations are continually changing and evolving, whether that's been through COVID and the expectation of better health and well-being provision, or the cost of living crisis, for example, and additional support with regards to our financial well-being. There's no doubt that employees are both moving the goalposts and expecting more from their employers. So it's very hard to keep pace with that, right? Is the first point. But then the second point is that ultimately, I dare say, and maybe some people will come back to and challenge me on this, but there's often a disconnect because we don't ask our people, our employees, what their wants and needs are. More often than not, I work with some clients. Dave is one of the exceptions to this. He'll talk about inside Fieldfisher, but where there's almost a nervousness to go ask employees what they really want and expect, because there's a fear that it's going to set expectations amongst the workforce that something new or better is going to be done. But I do really feel that we should be getting into a very good rhythm with our people of just constantly finding out and temperature checking their thoughts around the program, whether it meets their needs and what the simple tweaks and tactics are, let alone the big stuff that should be addressed. So I do often feel there is that disconnect, and partly we might be to blame because we often don't ask our people enough.
Yeah, and again, this very much in this time of checking in, you know, much more with our employees. I think that's a sort of a thread there. So, Dave, in terms of your organisation, you know, again, have you seen the disconnect, you know, between employees and kind of HR and well-being, etc.?
Certainly, look, I agree totally with Matthew that employees' needs and expectations are ever changing, and no doubt they'll continue to do so. As an employer, we have to make sure we're staying on top of that by looking at all of the new and existing benefits, as well as well-being resources out there. But as Matthew says, again, we need to understand what our employees want and need. It's easy to get sucked into exploring the latest trendy benefits, but we need to ensure they're aligned with our strategy built around solid feedback from employees. We actually recently conducted a benefits and wellbeing survey with all our employees, and the feedback we got from that was really good and really helping us move forward in the right direction.
So in terms of internal factors, what internal factors are affecting your organization's ability to attract and retain essential skills, Dave? You know, what can you tell us a bit about that?
Really, just the competitiveness of our compensation packages and benefits. They play a vital role in attracting and retaining talent. Like many other firms, we're having to be more cautious with budgets this year. While last year it was definitely an extremely competitive war for talent, which was what I feel centered around pay. That seems to have eased somewhat, but there's still an expectation for employees that we need to give a very attractive total reward package, with the hope to get new hires and to keep our existing talent. So
this competitiveness is a key factor here in terms of ensuring that you can offer an attractive compared to get the best talent. I mean, talent is such a big issue, and skills is such a big area. So I guess whatever you can do, and this is what you're trying to do here, isn't it? Matthew, typically with your clients, on a much broader sense, as well as Dave, what other internal factors, are you seeing an external to have a negative impact here?
Yeah, so just adding to what Dave said, from an internal perspective, and indeed we've just published our annual kind of strategy and design research in association with our friends at REBA, which many of your audience will be familiar with. Our research with them pointed to cost pressures being the biggest driving force and influence on what HR reward professionals feel they're going to be afforded the luxury of doing. In fact, 75% nearly of respondents said that cost pressures are going to be their #1 factor in determining what they can change in the near future. So no doubt there's a real challenge then to where we see the biggest external pressures coming from. And again, we asked this very question in the research, and it's very telling, because companies are going to have to walk this tightrope between what budgets they have to spend versus all of the pressure that they're going to see in the marketplace. So the three biggest pressures that employers said that they're facing at the moment influencing their benefits decisions are the cost of living crisis and wage inflation. So that's very much coming down to this question of the expectation of the workforce, right? They're clearly recognizing, and again, this was as high as 4 and 5, 80% of respondents said the combination of wage inflation and cost of living is going to have a huge impact on them. But then the third biggest external influencer was competition for talent, and the recognition that there are talent shortages across a lot of key skill sets in the UK workforce. Now, again, that can seem quite trite or obvious, but this is one of the big things that it's meant for benefits redesign in the past few years. Is I think our definition of talent has changed. In the past, a lot of businesses have had a very hierarchical approach to benefits. Maybe operative or support staff have got something different to professional and management staff. You've got something different to the executive population. The biggest investments and changes in benefits in the last 3 years have come for that bottom rung of the ladder, as clearly employers have recognized that the talent gaps and skills gaps they often have are in some of the most fundamental roles in their business. So we've started to see, for example, healthcare provision for everyone, better protection benefits, particularly when it comes to sickness and absence for everybody in a lot of large employers for the first time. So again, just trying to make it very real for your audience, where you're going to have this budget pressures coming internally, but you're going to have all of this competitiveness for talent externally. The key thing for me is know exactly where you mean and what you mean by talent in your organization, and see if that prioritizes some very obvious gaps for you in terms of benefits design.
Yeah, so very much, yeah, it's always about just really exploring what you really need, isn't it? What the business needs. Let's, on that note then, well, that's a good time to bring the first poll in. So based on that research that you just mentioned there, Matthew, I mean, I think that's 200 HR professionals took part. So it showed really that many employers are still struggling with some of the fundamentals of their benefits program. So in this poll, then, which is going to pop onto your screen in a moment, let's have a go at this one, everyone. So which of the below aspects of your program do you feel are in most need of attention? So is it A, funding, i.e. what you pay for, B, the choice, what people can select or pay for, C, the communications, how you promote the benefits, or D, the use of technology, how your employees access the benefits? So have a go at that one, everyone, and then we'll feed those results back in. Matthew, any predictions then? I know you've probably seen the research, but what are you going to say is going to come top there?
My view is that communications is likely going to come top. It's one of those things, even employers with great benefit programs, they often find their Achilles heel is having the time and their good habits to deliver great communications around benefits. So again, if I look to the research, only 9% of respondents said that they felt that their comms was in a great place. By comparison, nearly 40% said that funding was in a great place, and another 40% said that funding was in an okay place. So my view would be comms is likely to come out on top if our audience today mirrors that of our research audience. But yeah, let's wait and see.
Dave, just in light, I guess, of your own organisation, what do you think is going to come top?
Look, I want to pick something different than Matthew, but I think I have to go for the communications. I'd say it's very important, and yeah, just the feel that we're getting is people want to just show what they have again for the competitiveness. Communications very important. So.
Okay, right. Well, let's feed the results back in. So yeah, well, that's quite interesting, really. So we've actually 0% for communication.
Oh,
really quite interesting. Yeah, no. So funding top 43%, closely followed by tech 36% and 21% choice. So yeah, I mean, I guess funding, let's face it, it is perhaps the sign of the times at the moment. And perhaps that's what it is. I don't know. Matthew, thoughts?
Yeah, Peter, if I may, before we move on, that's fascinating to see. To try and interpret it a bit, we've definitely got now, I would say, the haves or have-nots in terms of our clients. So if I look at the last 3 years, and again, our research looked at what have you done in the last 3 years and what do you plan to do in the next 2 years, we're definitely seeing a pattern emerging of those who, either because of talent issues, COVID or otherwise, significantly improved their benefits in the last 3 years, and so ticks that funding box and maybe ticks the technology box, versus those who are recognizing the need to do it in the next 2 years ahead. So maybe our audience today, and if you are in this place, just to give you a bit of thinking on it, if you do need to kind of fix that funding box or at least audit where it's at, I'd say look at it in these terms. At Howden with our clients, we always talk about the big 5 benefits, right? So in order of priority to your employees, it is almost always annual leave, followed by pensions and retirement, followed by healthcare, followed by life cover, followed by some form of disability or sickness cover. My view is you should look at those 5 big benefits and work out, firstly, do you believe you should have a one-size-fits-all package, or should it be tiered or hierarchical, because the nature of the business is quite hierarchical? But that's, for me, how you should audit that design piece to work out, do you really need to fix your funding? Obviously, maybe relative to an external benchmark and to peers. But Dave, I know we've been through a similar thing together. I wonder your view on that.
Yeah, so look, I think funding, I am a bit shocked at the comms of 0, but the funding part, like I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of budget constraints and thoughts about budget this year. I doubt anybody's budgets went up this year. So if you're wanting to introduce a new benefit, you're going to have to take away from somewhere, things along those lines. So it's understanding that people do think that. So yeah.
Okay, great. So at this point, any questions again for our audience? If you've got something there, it might be on that poll itself, but please do ask them and I'll share them with the panel for you. So please do ask those questions. So, well, Matthew, I guess following on the challenging time, as we're saying, for organisations with tighter budgets. So let's kind of explore that a little bit more. How can improvements be achieved without significant additional budget or spend on benefits?
Yeah, indeed. So the best way to look at this is we always talk to our clients about the building blocks of a great program, and to whatever level you need to do this to have success in your own organization, the things you can actually change or do fall into 4 buckets, if you like, which are funding, as we've talked about. In fact, they were from our poll, right? So funding, choice, communications, and technology. And there's no doubt that the actual funding itself is the most expensive part of providing a great program, right? So whether you offer 5 or 10% pension, single or family healthcare, that's where the vast majority of your cost is going to be. By comparison, the more tactical things you can do are typically around choice. So simply facilitating the access to products and services for your people to avail themselves of if they need to, and communications. And I think the best way to look at this is both of those things are typically a function of time, not money, right? So when we think about the low or no cost ways of doing things, and I mentioned this, that in the research and with most of our clients, they kind of self-diagnose that comms is in most need of attention. That is literally just working out a framework for how you want to communicate, a calendar on which you want to communicate, then working out where you can pull on resources that will already be available and free to use, your providers, your consultant, your platform partner, whoever it is, and then simply building the good habits of sitting down and going, right, this month we're going to talk to our people about these 3 things, and I'm going to lean on these partners to help me do it. There's no doubt that's the biggest gap to success in programs, and you almost need to put no money into it. It's just a function of time. And then it's the same with choice. A lot of people, whether or not our audience today have flexible benefits, a lot of people can feel that choice is constrained by having a great platform. Now, there's no doubt that for companies of a certain size, and again, Dave will likely talk to this, having a great platform in place is the right mechanism to offer people choice. And that does cost some money, right? So it has to be an investment. But in reality, so much choice nowadays, if we look to what's happening in the financial well-being space, for example, you don't need a platform to facilitate that. You might just introduce somebody to a mortgage broker or a will writing service or a debt management service or whatever it may be, where you're facilitating a service or choice for the individual without having to invest in a platform to actually then make it all work. So for me, if you're thinking about those building blocks of your plan, the cheapest and most effective ones, which just need your time, not money, are going to be how well you communicate it and how you offer choice to your people.
Thanks, Matthew. That's good advice, I think there. Dave, can you give us any kind of tangible examples of improvements you've made at kind of very little cost?
Yeah, so we've always had a bit of a flexible and a lot of choice around our benefits, but I totally agree with communication. That is such an effective way for us for increasing employee engagement with new and existing benefits. Over the last 18 months, we've significantly improved our communication strategy. We have a flexible benefits window on our benefits platform in November each year. And last year, in the lead up to that, we, with Matthew and the team at Howden, put together a comms plan and implemented a month near enough of various emails, webinars. We had a very well received pensions and financial wellbeing newsletter. All this really, it contributed. We had a 50% increase in the number of employees logging on to the benefits platform than the previous year. And most impressively, over 15% of employees increased their pension contribution in that 1 month. So again, that was just no cost, no extra cost there at all. It was just pure comms, strategy, planning, everything like that. And yeah, it's great success. So.
I mean, communication. I know it came up low on the survey, but you're absolutely right. Half the time, it's people. Employees don't realise what you go to all this kind of trouble of putting these fantastic benefits in place, and sometimes too many, isn't it? But it's communicating them is key, isn't it? So, okay. Remember questions, please. Really. Oh, hang on. I think I might have a question, which would be good. Let's have a look. I have got a question for you, which is great. So let's ask this one. So funding was sort of mentioned here by someone. So my concern is our benefits actually address the root cause. So I'm questioning if we're focusing on the right things. I believe this is based on limited data. The root cause of lots of the issues is based on workload and leadership behavior. So we have some great benefits on a benefits portal, but the feedback I constantly get is I don't have the time to look into the benefits, let alone use them. So until we address the root cause, I'm not sure we will move to the needle. Is that could you get that one, Matthew? Is that something you could respond to?
Yeah, indeed. I think it's probably not something that you could solve in a benefits context, right? But I absolutely understand the challenges that our audience member there is raising. Culture, and kind of the impact of work on our employee experience and our ability to actually engage with and avail ourselves of all the wonderful things that we do for our people is a real challenge. And actually, probably to bring it a little bit closer to something we see very regularly, is a lot of employers will start to build out a well-being strategy. Right, so they'll think about, okay, what things do we want to do to help people's physical well-being, their mental well-being, their financial well-being, without necessarily recognizing or acknowledging the negative impact that the culture and the work and the job itself has on those factors. And so it can feel very hollow or very disingenuous to an employee when you're kind of saying, look at all the wonderful things we do for your well-being, but actually without recognizing that starts with the culture and the expectations of the role. So, just kind of try and conflate the two a little bit. I can absolutely understand where the question comes from, that, benefits are being looked at more and more through a well-being lens, right? They're designed to support and promote individuals' well-being. But if the very fundamentals of the job detract from that and detract from the employee experience of it, it's very difficult to close that gap. And we often talk about this, right? Employee experience, at least in our view, falls into two camps nowadays. You've got employee experience as in, how easy does my employer make it for me to do and enjoy my job, right? So getting the day job done. And the other side of employee experience is, how well does my employer let me avail myself of all the wonderful things that they say they do for me? And one can massively impinge upon the other if we're not careful. And I think that whenever an employer wants to espouse employee experience being at the core of its thinking around its people, you need to solve both sides of that coin. Otherwise, it's never going to land successfully.
Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, and obviously there's a lot here in this question about data, and obviously data, you've got to build, that's got to build, isn't it? And obviously there's lots of different kind of sometimes systems you've got to pull together. So I guess once that data will help, but that takes some time. Dave, did you have any thoughts on that question, or does that resonate with you at all in terms of that challenge that they've got there?
Yeah, look, it's something we're thinking about. It's just even the choice out there, the funding, we have to speak to the people in charge and justify everything that's happening. We use data for that. We'll use employee feedback. We'll just try and get a case to say, look, this is somewhere we're falling short. We need this, and justify everything really. So yeah, the more resources we have, the better.
All right, great. Sorry, Peter,
if I could quickly, and I think to strengthen something that Dave and the Fieldfisher team have done very well, and again, I think to address part of the question that came in, there's a big difference between some of the big benefits, the very traditional benefits that employers provide, right? A lot of them are designed as a safety net that you want employees to engage with maybe once or twice a year, feel very grateful are there, but really they're not going to tap into them or think about them on a day-to-day basis, right? So our modality and how we think about engaging employees with pensions, healthcare, etc., should be very different to how we think about day-to-day well-being. And one of the things that Fieldfisher is very good at is this balance of what do they bring on site and do on site for people to promote day-to-day well-being and make just their ability to do their job and responding to short-term needs, addressing that, versus how they think and talk about the big things like retirement and healthcare, etc. Again, I think we as employers and HR teams, we need to kind of separate the two and realize that that they're designed for very different purposes and with very different time horizons.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots we're coming on to, which I think will also help with some of that question as well. So, well, timely really, data and analytics really. Let's talk about data. So, what role should data and analytics play in shaping the approach to well-being and benefits? Matthew, what would you advise there?
Well, the first thing I'll say to hopefully allay any concerns here is, as with every industry at the moment, there is so much talk about AI, about ChatGPT, about advanced analytics, and about all of these things. There's the analogy to the school disco and what have you, which probably is no longer too appropriate to say. But my point being, there's an awful lot of talk about it, and it's not really happening. But importantly, it doesn't need to happen either, right? We don't need clever and sophisticated views of data and analytics to do our job well. I actually think we just need to be much better at the fundamentals. So going back to a couple of things, you take pensions, right, and pension governance, and back to, again, the success that Dave's had and any employer can have. Look at your demographic, cut it up by their gender, their age, their earnings level, and other factors, and go, where do we get any spikes or troughs in the data where they're not contributing as much or they don't have as big a pots as we hope they would? And then that's it. Target your communications accordingly. Similarly to then what we started with today, survey your employees, or even just get in a room, have a focus group and ask them, right? Data can still be very, very basic and yet be hugely impactful to the decision making that we have. But just to wrap this up, for me at least, and hand over to Dave, the key thing is that I think for a lot of us, when it comes to our benefits and well-being, we don't have a clear goal in mind, and therefore we don't have clear KPIs or indicators or data that we know we want to collect to tell us whether or not we're doing a good job. So in order to understand the role of data, I think we need to go back to asking the questions of why are we providing the benefits? What outcomes do we realistically hope they can drive? And then going in search of where can I find a bit of data that supports that? So Dave, for example, saying we had a 50% increase in engagement this year. That might not tell us in absolute terms if we're right or wrong, but we definitely know we're trending in the right direction to having more people value and appreciate the benefits, right? So point being, it doesn't need to be sophisticated, but there's some very obvious and simple data we can all gather to inform our decision making for sure.
Dave, so data and analytics for you then. So, I'm interested in how much you've used it. Has it kind of informed on decision making around well-being and benefits for you?
Yeah, it certainly has. Look, you can always get distracted by what's going on in the media and the anecdotal evidence out there. You think people are thinking short term at the moment. We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. Nobody, in your head, you'd think nobody cares about long term. But again, we used data and analytics, employee feedback, and that clearly showed that people were still interested in retirement planning. Howden, Matthew put together some really good stuff on pensions that we use to make some really key decisions. And those decisions are really going to increase our employees' planning retirement outcomes. Along with the benefits survey I mentioned earlier, we get a lot of aggregated data back from a lot of our providers. For example, our employee health assessments, that has really good data that we get back as MI, and it really show you and pointed factors that are affecting our employees' performance and things like sickness absence. Because it gives stress levels, things like that. So we can use that data. So we're always and actively trying to pull all this data from different providers, PMI, GP services, health assessments, get it all together and use that for overall strategy. So I think it's really important. So.
And I guess, I mean, that's some of the challenge, isn't it? Taking it all into one place, and you know, I mean, how do you do that? How are you kind of going through that?
Again, we have a really good HR system at the moment we're building, and we can just link all this data up and just sort of really start to point a picture, and different demographics as well we can drill into. So yeah, it's definitely going to be even more important in the future. So.
And just to add to that, even when you don't, or for a smaller employer, right, who doesn't have some of those capabilities, I'd come back to, and we often talk with our clients, and Dave and I do this together, we've got our shared plan on a page, right? And we, at the top of it, we go, what are the outcomes we're trying to drive? And in reality, when you look at the very core of providing benefits and well-being, there's typically two elements to that. There's a reward element, i.e., does it add to how well rewarded I feel I am? And does it make it a compelling offer generally, whether I'm a candidate or an existing employee? And then the second part of it is it supporting the productivity of the business? Which could sound like a big leap, but if you know that you've either got absence issues or claims issues or well-being issues, however you define those, and there's bits of data you can get, anecdotal or otherwise, to help inform that, even if you had just sat there and went, do our employees feel well rewarded, and do we have a sense of whether or not our people are generally well, and our policies, benefits and services are contributing to whether they're well? That's all you need as a landscape to be able to answer the right questions, to know whether to invest more or not, whether to change where you're invested and otherwise. So yeah, my view is start with the real basics and just gather those and then build from there.
Just so we've got a couple of questions coming. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, there's one on funding which I'll leave to the end if you don't mind, because in the essence of time. This one, other one is worth exploring now, I think, which is really talking about, you know, employees being overloaded in terms of work, you know, in terms of that idea, and you know, so I think the suggestion is, with, you know, maybe read this one out. It's quite long, but I think not making life difficult for employees, ensuring they are not overloaded would go a long way to improve wellness. So why is there so much emphasis on getting people well or benefits, when for many firms just making sure you don't make them ill would be a better starting point? In other words, how might we be making our people unwell? It's a more profound question, given the prevalence of burnout in some industries. People who are chronically worn out look to retiring earlier. Any thoughts on that one, Matthew?
Yeah, certainly. It goes back to the first question we answered today, right? That there is no doubt that we can think about solving well-being issues through the benefits, products and services and initiatives we have that will sit within normally the reward team's remit. But we're absolutely right. Organizational design, culture, workload expectations, work methods, support, management capabilities, all of those things, I'll be honest, have a far greater influence on whether or not the employee is going to be well in a work context. And you know, there's no doubt that you'd be fighting against the tide to think that solely investing time in benefits and well-being initiatives, as we're talking about them today, will solve those problems if fundamentally at the core of a business, the culture and the work expectations are broken. There is no doubt about that. So the question is a very valid one. But on the basis that you either acknowledge that the culture and work demands are there, and therefore the business invests in benefits and well-being to do what it can to alleviate or support that, or indeed to try and tackle the both together, has to be a mode of thinking. So Dave will know well, although not necessarily Fieldfisher, there are absolutely law firms out there who expect their pound of flesh, but then invest very heavily in reward, benefits and well-being as an acknowledgement of the fact that, look, we demand a huge amount of our people, and so this is the very least we can do to compensate for and recognize that, right? There are others then who will build out their culture to be a little bit softer, a little bit easier, have a very different style, and still also then culturally invest in benefits and well-being. I think it's knowing which side of that divide you're on.
Dave, any thoughts?
Yeah, so look, as an employer, we have to be very mindful that our core offering as an employer is about family-friendly policies. It's about flexible working. It's about all that. Like, our benefits and well-being aren't really to replace your sort of work-life balance. It's to supplement it. We'll have to really just look and see that we're communicating that to employees. Some, again, like a mindfulness app doesn't just counteract. We need to be just very mindful that people are not burning out, close to burnout. It's not and papering over the cracks. We just need to get that core bit right first, foremost. So
it's funny actually, because burnout comes up a bit, obviously pre-COVID it came up in different ways. Now it's coming up in a different way, whereas it's a different kind of on-demand sort of thing. So it's another discussion actually, but probably another webinar. But let's move on in the essence of time in terms of technology. Every webinar we do, every discussion every round table, technology is such a huge enabler. It has been over these last 4 years as well. So Matthew, where does tech fit into the employee experience in your thoughts?
There's no doubt it should be at the very heart of the employee experience, not only because we're so much more used to tech in our personal lives as well as inside the workplace, but also because of the nature of benefits themselves. I mentioned earlier, right? Every program will have some variation of those 4 building blocks: the funding, the choice, the communications, and the technology. And for me, you can't have a great benefits strategy and a great benefits program without addressing the technology question. That doesn't mean to say that it needs to be an all singing, all dancing, flexible benefits and well-being platform with every bell and whistle, but fundamentally, it does need to be something that connects the employees with their benefits and allows them, in their own way, on demand, to access the benefits when they need to. So that could start with just a far better version of the intranet, right? And just thinking about, okay, take pension. I need to provide employees with education and information. I then need to tell them how to join or change their contributions if they want, or if at that stage of their life, thinking about, planning for retirement, how they then go on that journey, right? That can all be done effectively through a good intranet site. So technology doesn't need to be just one idea of it and buying a platform, but certainly the larger you get and the more sophisticated you want your benefits to be, so it tends to trend in that direction, right? By the time you've got 1,000+ employees, and by the time you've got 15, 20 different benefits that you either want to communicate or have employees make choices on, then naturally you'll trend towards a great platform. But it really just starts with this question of, what should the employee experience look like? How should they access information? How should they be able to get the most out of the benefits? And then also internally, how can that platform simplify our administration processes and make it easier for the HR team to do more? So you can't not have it and have a great program, but it's not just one size or the best version of it that is needed. It needs to be right sized according to the organization.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And Dave, so what ways are you using technology at Fieldfisher, out of interest?
Yeah, so I know I've mentioned it a few times already, but we're very proud of our employee benefits platform now that we have with Howden's. We've put a lot of time and effort into improving it. In the past, we did have quite a lot of benefits, so many different ones, but they were all in so many different locations, different passwords to log on, you would search on the internet for hours to try and just find something. So we've put everything into the one place onto the benefits platform. It's got policy documents, it's got the ability to select benefits, it's got single sign-on as well. So again, we have emergency childcare. We don't want somebody to have to go and worry about, again, passwords, logging on, where to go to get that. Just click through and you get through to different things. We still use the internet as well, quite heavily to signpost to the benefits platform, and really to increase engagement with everything and to link everything in. But yeah, we're really focused on just that single sign-on, everything in the one place. It's going down very well. So
let's just run our second poll then as well. This one will come up on your screen now. So this one is, what aspect of the workplace well-being needs the most attention at your business? So is it A, mental, B, physical, C, financial, or D, social? No, you didn't do very well last time, you two. So, you know, so Dave, what are you going to go for?
Look, at the risk of getting 0% again, and I will be very shocked this time. Financial, it has to be financial, I feel.
Matthew, any thoughts? Matthew, are you there? Dave, you're still there, are you? Sorry, everyone.
I'm still here. I'll predict for Matthew and say he would pick financial.
Oh, yeah, I think, okay. Okay. Well, we got the results. I think Matthew's just dropped off. We'll get him back in a second. So, well, let's go to the results. So the results are, well, 69% mental, 25% financial, 6% physical. Dave, do you want to comment on that one?
Not doing very well here, but an improvement from last time. Look, maybe I'm a bit biased because we have been very concentrating on mental over the last mental and physical over the last while. Financial is just more at the moment, but yeah, no, it's not really surprising in the look of it.
Matthew's back. We lost you for a moment there, my good man. Right, yeah, we're just really looking at the poll results have come in there, Matthew. So 69% mental, 25% financial, 6% physical, 0% social. Any thoughts on?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think based upon some of the questions we've had today, I would have reversed my original thoughts and gone with mental over financial. So because I think that aligns to a lot of what the audience have been talking about and asking of us. But it's interesting because from our research, cost of living crisis and financial well-being still ranks as the highest concern that reward professionals feel they're not addressing well today.
So thank you for that. Thanks for taking part, everyone. So just let's move on to more about, well, impactful. I quite like the word impactfulness because I think it's pretty powerful. So how do we make well-being more impactful for employers? Matthew?
So we take quite a structured approach to this, and I think
we lost Matthew again. He's got some tech problems. So Dave, do you mind jumping in there?
Yeah, certainly. Look, I think all the pillars of well-being are all linked anyway. Financial well-being has an effect on mental well-being, physical well-being. Again, over the last couple of years since I've been at the firm, we have really concentrated quite heavily on physical, mental well-being. We've brought in modern new health assessments, a new well-being app, and as Matthew mentioned earlier, our well-being app provider comes into the office as well, does on-site fitness classes, well-being workshops. But again, the benefits survey that we ran for all employees just a couple of months ago, it did really show us that financial well-being was way on top of everything else, and was very important to them. So we're looking to build and expand on some of the key work we're already doing there. And just trying to do that through communication and education again. So
I think, you know, I mean, hopefully Matthew will be back with us in a minute and he might be able to round that one off a bit. And also you talked about financial well-being. Matthew's on the move. Look at him, he's on the move. This is exciting stuff, isn't it? I love live webinars, don't you, with everyone? So, you know, I think you talked about financial well-being, and I think that years ago we used to cover this. It was really, you know, people didn't want to share too much, but now that's become a much more part of the whole health and well-being piece, isn't it? The financial well-being. I think that's really, really positive.
Yeah. So again, I just think it links in with everything else. If you solve that problem, it has a knock-on effect.
Matthew, he's gone again, hasn't he? He's got terrible Wi-Fi issues there.
How important technology is, and then this happens. So, but ironic.
Yeah, I know. Hopefully it gets sorted anyway, but we'll come back to Matthew anyway. So let's think about reviewing. So let's think about the starting point then, Dave. I'm quite interested in, you know, obviously, how long did you say you'd been at Fieldfisher, did you say?
Yeah, so I joined from another law firm about 2 years ago, and first couple of months just reviewing what was going on here at the firm, and then about 18 months ago we really appointed Howden as consultants and just to review all of our benefits, because we were finding employees were disengaged with our benefits and wellbeing offerings. Don't know if that was probably an effect of COVID and lockdown, that things weren't really moving or progressing. So I think a lot of firms might be the same. But yeah, we worked with Matthew and Howden just to identify and benchmark where we're falling behind, how we can engage our employees more. And we also saw a great opportunity after a demonstration of the technology and what they have to be one of the leading firms in terms of benefits technology and visibility really of what our benefits were and comms. So yeah, it's been a 18-month project.
And what led to the, obviously where did you discover you had that problem? What were you looking for to kind of suddenly go, hey, we need to address this?
Look, I'm very data heavy and just looking at things, and we're gathering exit interview feedback, even looking at what we were sending out to prospective new hires in terms of benefits communication, and there just did seem to be not a big buzz about it. If that was the thing, we weren't really getting that. So yeah, it was just a bit evident that we could be doing a lot more in terms of that and just getting employees engaged. So.
Yeah. So probably not a lot around that talent retention. Probably is where it may have come from. Okay, Matthew, well, thanks for joining us back again. I'd love to see a different room. So we were just talking about what's the best place to start when reviewing well-being and benefits. Dave just shared with us, how he tackled it.
Yeah, so I think there's quite a few different building blocks getting this right. I think the first is knowing what you want to achieve. Right, so knowing what those reward and well-being outcomes are, to then knowing, as I say, what data sources, what inputs you need into that decision-making process to know whether or not you're where you want to be. So a really good example is where we say to clients, if you take the external perspective of benchmarking and the internal perspective of employees' appreciation of or value of the package, and you correlate those two things together, you understand a really, really key picture, which is, for example, do you think you're at or ahead of the market, but your employees think you're behind the market, or vice versa? Or do those two things correlate? Do you know you're behind the market and your employees tell you are as well? Or are you looking great? Are you providing market-leading benefits and your employees appreciate it? But getting that shared internal and external view and mapping them together to know where's our gap. Is it that we think we're great and employees don't understand or appreciate the benefits? Or is it that, the market's telling us behind and our employees feel the same? At the very least, getting those two data points together is critical to knowing what should you do. And then building from there, as I say, going back to those building blocks and then seeing how you can assess between funding, choice, communicating, and the use of technology, where are your weak points and where are your priorities. That should always be, for me, how you build out and iterate then a great program.
Yeah, I like that whole, like you say, that shared learning that you as a business have, isn't it? It's not just about one business. You can. I think that comparative is really important. So let's talk a little bit about, to sort of round off, really about sustainability, business sustainability. And I think will that, and that comes in many ways. So will that have a high impact on your benefit strategy for 2023? Dave, what about for your business?
Yeah, look, I will indeed, and without trying to throw out all the buzzwords of the day, like we do explore benefits that align with our environmental goals. We launched an electric vehicle scheme last year, last year, just to kind of push that forward. We're looking at social responsibility, making sure our benefits and well-being initiatives promote diversity and inclusion. It's just very important, again, just to make sure everybody at the firm's happy and engaged. And also, lastly, when we're developing our benefit strategy, we also need to be very mindful and consider any financial implications. Again, budget mentioned earlier, and we have to ensure that all of our offerings are feasible and contribute to the firm's and employees' long-term financial stability. So it's just very important. So.
And you're obviously reviewing that. What sort of periods you review? How do you review it? How often?
Well, again, like for us, things might have been cyclical, annual. We just have to be on top of it all the time now. Things change month on month. We have to be aware of what's going on. It's a near weekly basis. Me and Matthew have chats, just how things are moving, make sure we're on track. You could very easily get invested in one area of reward and neglect the other parts, but it just can't happen because you won't move with the times. So.
No. And it's gone away that very much, we're not in a place where it was a 10-year plan or a 5-year plan.
Exactly.
It's no longer, we don't live in that world anymore, do we? Matthew, just your thoughts, I guess, will business sustainability be a big issue, and what will be the impact, really?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to it. And then there's also some red herrings in there as well, in all honesty. So this business sustainability, I think, again, in the context of what we talked about today, the impact of work and culture and working practices. And it's interesting because there was some great PwC research last year amongst CEOs in the UK, and 9 out of 10 CEOs said that business sustainability and well-being will impact future results. So when you look at it through that lens of sustainability, there's no doubt that cultural piece and how people are working and recognize the impact on its well-being is going to be business critical. We always joke, 9 out of 10 companies have a CEO that recognizes it, and 1 out of 10 companies need a new CEO, right? But then on the other side of it, there's all those other elements of sustainability, as Dave has just mentioned. So the way that we talk about it, work with clients, is your fundamental benefits of well-being strategy is still going to be predominantly driven by reward and well-being outcomes, but it's just overlaying each decision that you make with those sustainability lenses, whether that's ESG and climate, DEI and inclusivity, to then just double check that nothing you're doing is going to get to an unforeseen outcome. So, you know, for example, we had one client who had a hierarchical benefit structure, and they said, well, look, that's about the job that you do. It's about market competitiveness and the relevance to the individual. But when we looked at their data for them, they had a 50-50 split, male and female, in the senior populations who all got very generous benefits. They had a 75%, 25% female split in the lower grade population. So ultimately, their female colleagues weren't getting access to good benefits. So when we overlaid that lens through it, they recognized that their gap through a DEI and a sustainability perspective was greater fairness for their female colleagues. So it's about recognizing where the decisions you make could end up with those unforeseen consequences. But to my other point as well, I think there's a real set of red herrings in all of this. You know, people think that there's the next, like, great 2 or 3 benefits that they're missing or things that they're not doing that they should be. And in reality, there aren't particular ESG, climate or DEI benefits that are just simply out there and you can tick a box and be done with. None more so than in the pension space. You know, everyone thinks about ESG from an investment lens within their pension. In reality, what you have control of as an employer, the impact you can have, and the choices you have around which provider you use or which investment strategy they go with is so vanilla right now that actually there's almost nothing that you can do to say, this is great, we've selected something more aligned to our ESG values. Again, back to my comment of, there are a lot of things that are being talked about, but they're not much really happening in action. That's a classic example of where everyone's thinking about pensions and ESG and climate investing, but the market isn't there yet. So it's great we're all thinking about it, but it's going to be 5-10 more years before we go, actually, I can make material choices as an employer that are aligned to our values and are going to drive a better outcome in that space. So there's definitely a few red herrings around sustainability right now, where everyone's creating a lot of noise, but the impact we can have, back to your favorite word, Peter, is very different to the noise that's being made.
Well, that's life, isn't it, really? Let's face it. Right, that's literally all of our questions. We've got a few questions that have come up, which I know were from a little bit earlier, but I thought, again, let's discuss them now. So this is back to funding, when we first started about funding, talking about funding. So with the funding issue under discussion, which it was at that point, how can employees who are on long NHS waiting lists best be supported? Thoughts, please, gentlemen.
Yeah, I don't mind having a first crack at this one. So a really good way to look at this is, and again, it takes a specialist potentially, so it might not be something the HR team, the reward team could do in and of themselves, but you have to look at the various care pathways, right? So for example, mental health as a care pathway, musculoskeletal concerns as a care pathway, etc. And then when you look at it in those terms, and look where in the care pathway is there a challenge with access to or availability of cover, or where can you have meaningful impact relatively inexpensively, you can start to make some smart decisions around what you do for your employees. So for example, you take simply getting a initial consultation or diagnosis. That's often the biggest part of the kind of healthcare pathway, if you like, that's broken. It's not actually getting access to the surgery or what have you, as much as someone might be on a waiting list. More often than not, it's actually presentation and diagnosis of the condition in the first place and getting access to a GP. So for me, you have to look at, where is that pain being felt? Where are people actually individually not getting access to services? And then designing your benefits, your wellbeing solutions in that way. Because if we go back a decade ago, healthcare was very much, you either got private medical insurance or you didn't, right? Nowadays, when you look at the employee benefits landscape from a health and wellbeing perspective, there are 100 different solutions available. And some of them are even free with the likes of your life cover or another benefit. And so actually working out how you can provide people with very simple but effective and cheap point solutions that will unblock a particular health issue they have, rather than it being a has medical insurance or doesn't have medical insurance, is the key way to look at it nowadays.
And Dave, have you got any example? Have you got any kind of this sort of scenario going on at your organisation?
Look, we're quite lucky. We do have very good private medical in place. We have GP services. I do know there's a lot of employers out there, and it's options we've explored. Musculoskeletal, which Matthew mentioned, it's quite prominent, and people wait long times to see a physio. There's some companies out there that have physios that can come to your office for 1 day a week, have 10 different slots. It's always a good option, and things along those lines. I think everybody knows in LinkedIn you're getting wellbeing offerings and services offered to you all the time. It's about triaging that, seeing what's most bang for your buck and best for employees that we can do. So again, there's services out there like Babylon as well, which offer GP services and link with the NHS. That's something that could be explored for people that don't have the private medical. But,
great. Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then final question then in from the audience, and this is probably quite a good one to sum up actually. So how is wellness measured in companies? So we can obviously ask that to Matthew to give us an overview, and Dave, obviously you're going to tell us how on earth you're measuring wellness. But so maybe Dave, should we start with you actually?
Going back again, I'm a data guy. I know it doesn't tell you everything, but it kind of will tell you what the big picture is at the firm. Again, we get a lot of MI data back from employees. We can see absence records, just really feedback from HR business partners, HR advisors, how people are feeling, what's going on. Just get that, again, not even specific aggregated data, where we're at, any points, pain points as well we can look at. But it's just that general engagement and a bit of a buzz around the firm, around well-being. It's just really, you just feel like you can get a feel for it. That's the best way I can describe it. Yeah.
Well, again, you're a real advocate of data and analytics, aren't you? So Matthew, just to sum up on that one.
Yeah, so there's two sides to it. There's people who are unwell, so gather data in terms of absence and claims and service utilization to look at the whole, why are people unwell and how many. But then in terms of actually understanding who, without being absent and just doing the normal day job, is well or not, again, the best thing to do is ask them. Right, it can feel really weird to find the right set of questions to ask. As Dave knows, we do a lot of research into how do you ask and elicit the right responses from people. But ultimately, you should be temperature checking with your employees, much like an NPS score, right? To kind of go, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you feel, and is there something particularly that's detracting from that? It doesn't need to be as kind of inhumane, if you like, as a survey. It's probably the wrong word, isn't it? But you know what I mean. It can actually just be training line managers to get that temperature check feedback and be able to understand how well their people are. But a big part of it is just talking to your employees.
All right, thanks, Matthew. Right, listen, a little bit over time, so we hope we provided some key learning, insight, and best practice to help boost your well-being and benefit offering in these challenging times. Thanks to my panel today, Dave and Matthew, for your excellent insights and knowledge, and also to the Howden Group for partnering with us. Finally, thank you or for watching and taking part and your questions. And I hope you can join us with another webinar or event soon. So listen, thanks Dave and thanks Matthew for your time, and bye for now everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much. Cheers everyone.
Cheers, bye, thanks.